Hello and welcome everybody. It's great to welcome you here. It's 3 p.m. in the UK and we've got people joining us from plenty of different regions across the world. We've got hundreds of people signed up from companies and organizations in all different industries and markets. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Alex Bailey, the CEO of Bailey & French, and I have Ariel here with me. Ariel, hello, it's lovely to see you.
Good to see you all.
We'd love to hear who's with us today. So please do get going and share who you are and what you're up to and where you are watching from in the chat function. We would love to hear more. We are live streaming on LinkedIn. We are also live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. And this link will be available for people to watch the recording afterwards. So please do feel free to share. We're going to be talking today about change readiness to results. So we want to really talk about what does change readiness mean and what is the real impact in organizations at individual, team and leader levels if people are really change ready. So how are we actually measuring that with our clients that we're working with around change, and what are the results really showing us in terms of how those organizations are actually experiencing change and transformation? Lots of people have that in their strategies this year. How is that impacting people's well-being and resilience? And how is it impacting people's performance and their engagement? So huge impacts in this world today. And they're all topics we talk about with our clients, aren't they, Ariel?
Yeah, absolutely. One of probably, if not, conversations I have multiple times a day across lots of different clients. So it's something that is impacting every human being on this planet at the moment. So something that's always front of mind.
It is, absolutely. And, you know, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That it's not just work changes that we're talking about here. We're talking about macro changes in economies, in politics, in society, in climate. There's lots of different change that's impacting us. And I think what we really want to get into today in terms of change readiness is exploring our new model that we've been sharing of psychological flexibility to really determine how individuals are managing themselves and approaching and leading into change. Different from old change management models, a lot of old traditional change management approaches just simply don't work anymore. And we know the reason for that is because change doesn't happen at the same pace. It's much quicker. And we're now dealing with multiple changes at the same time. So rather than maybe two big changes in a year that organizations used to be able to stagger, they'll say, right, we'll focus on this for the first half, and then we'll move into this change so that we don't overload people. Now, organizations the world over are facing around 9 different changes in a year, which means we're almost operating in chaos where there's not a lot that can anchor us. So our new model around psychological flexibility is one that we really use to promote human agility, for people to think differently about being much more flexible and adaptable in the moment to changes and uncertainty that is around us all the time. So there's no time to kind of prep, to manage, to cope, to recover from a change anymore, like we used to support people. Now we need to help people really think about how can we just really bend and flex to all the changes that are going on, but in a way that protects me, that helps me manage my decision making, that helps move the organization forward, even in small steps incrementally if the future's not certain. So, Ariel, I wonder if you want to just highlight the 5 core areas of the Psych Flex model that we're going to talk through today. Is that helpful? Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working from 5 core pillars, adapted from the clinical model from the acceptance and commitment therapy. And starting with acceptance, which is simply just the ability to create space for difficult emotions without this sense of avoidance that we tend to experience. 2, then moving into distancing, which is just taking that step backwards from your thoughts and avoid kind of making decisions based on this constant kind of flex of reactivity and assumptions. Then moving into being present, which is all about attention and focus on the now, rather than being stuck kind of thinking of past experiences or constantly over worrying about the future. So just silencing that noise to be able to focus on the now. values, which is a really big one. So the ability to kind of make informed decisions based on what's important to us, but very importantly, balancing that with the needs from the organisation as well, which tends to have sort of trade-offs and give and take at different times. And the last one, all about action. So being able to take that small step amidst uncertainty, which we will all know from experience can be really difficult, especially if you're not sure what's ahead or you're afraid of kind of making the wrong decision. It's just about being able to take that intentional action and take that one small step every day. And that is it really for the 5.
Thank you, Ariel. You're right. And it's a model that we've lifted from the field of clinical psychology with lots of evidence-based research behind it on an individual model. And we've brought it into the organizational world, scaling it up for live conversations that work across large organizations. And we've been using this model now for about 18 months and testing it in all different industries and markets, and developed a global data set that we can actually look at and compare scores from one organization to look at what's the difference from a normal data set across thousands of people across the world. Where is this organization potentially leaning in terms of its strengths, and particularly in terms of areas of weakness for change readiness? What might that show in terms of how that organization adopts a new technology, for example? Lots of companies are looking at new digital and tech adaptations. Lots of organizations are looking at AI, not just assistance, but augmentation. And that ability for humans to be ready for the change and to lead into that change with positive growth and excitement is so important in this new era, because we know things are going to change on a daily basis. So how can we help everybody really embrace the tools and resources that we have available? Because we know we've got project management tools, there's waterfall, there's agile technology, there's all kinds of methodologies that we can use. And they're fantastic to help us be agile in an organization. But the humans that use them need to also have the level of adaptability and flexibility, that agility, to really use those tools in the right way for the organization. So we're going to explore that a bit more today. So Ariel, we've been testing that model that you just went through right the way across these organizations and looking at what those different scores mean. So we've been running pilot workshops with populations that are a good cross-section of organizations and comparing them to the global data set. We've done quite a lot of evaluation reports based on that data set and what the lead indicators are for those organizations. Ariel, is there anything that stood out for you? And you've been writing a lot of those reports with me. What stood out for you when we're kind of looking at those results? What are the types of things that you're seeing come through?
I think one thing that's been really eye-opening is the distinction of kind of the PsychFlex application at different levels of an organization, because obviously across organizations there's nuances of how they operate and what the skills and strengths that they tend to attract in terms of talent. But within any given organization, the impact of psychological flexibility levels, it's the way it manifests is really interesting, because from a kind of senior leadership perspective, they're looking vision, strategy, and that's a really massive impact on the rest of the organization in terms of how they strategize change and how they plan and approach it, all the way right down to a kind of individual contributor level, because these are the people that are going to be out here doing, the different elements and actioning things, and how they accept and perceive and experience the change will be different, and the impact that it will have will be different. So I think it's one thing that I've seen is kind of noticing the nuances of how PsychFlex can enable the kind of change and transformation at multiple different levels across the organisation, and the nuances that exist in that.
Yeah, I agree. What I've also noticed, which is, I guess, connected and similar to that, is almost the excitement at senior levels in organisations, at that kind of exec and SLT level, where strategy is being set. These people are leaders in the organisation who are coming up with some of the ideas and trying to engage the strategy and develop plans for the rest of the organisation. And I noticed that their pace is incredibly fast, but their pace of thinking, their pace of adopting that change is fast. And when we talk to them about change in the organization, I often hear the words kind of change resistant. How are we going to get people through this? The nervousness is almost like we get it and we can move at pace. but what are the things that are going to be the almost the cultural drag? What's the friction? What's going to get in the way of us actually moving forward with a big change? So I wonder if we should take a change, a common change that we're seeing at the moment, such as kind of a digital or a technological transformation. So maybe adopting some new technology that's actually going to change part of how the organization functions. So that might be roles, that might be teams, it might be structure, but it also might be processes and systems of how, clients engage with that organization. So if we think about that context, I know a lot of people out there are experiencing change and transformation programs this year. And then we'll walk through what would the results of that model indicate, either positively or negatively, that would help a leader right now if they are facing into a transformation program. So stay with us. We're going to go through those different elements here. I would love to hear people's thoughts and comments as we work through the model, so that it's not just me and Ariel talking here. And hello to everybody who's already shared with us where you are. Please do, if you've just joined us, please do share where you are. We're streaming right the way across the world and across multiple different channels today. We'd love to have some rich engagement from your experience. I know we've got a very senior audience actually, with lots of experience and expertise. So please do let us know your thoughts on the change and transformation that you're facing in your organisation too. So let's walk through this model then, Ariel, with this digital tech transformation program in mind. So let's imagine we're going through the model. We are looking at the first part, which we talked about was acceptance of emotions. So it's not about telling people they have to accept the change up front. It's saying how comfortable are we with accepting emotions when a change or a challenge or uncertainty hits us. So imagine we've got a technological shift to make. We've got maybe 12 months to adopt a new technology to transform the organization's way of supporting our customers. And we're leaders in the organization, and we're thinking about, okay, so how much do we accept? Or does our leadership population maybe accept change easily and accept the emotions that are surrounding change? So do they engage with it? Do we avoid those emotions? Or do we listen to them? And do we allow them to help actually guide our thinking? Ariel, what do you think those indicators might show to someone who's leading a change program?
I think as a key indicator would be comfortability with, but also the kind of level and complexity that people can describe, how they feel towards kind of the potential positives or potential drawbacks that might come with the transformation, the kind of the ability and comfortability that people have with having those types of conversations and being able to name the exciting and not so exciting emotions that we might feel, and be able to have that on the surface, so people feel like we don't just have to get on with this and not kind of process or think about what cues we can take from the emotions that we're experiencing and what it tells us about what we need to protect. Would that be kind of values of the organization, our own personal values, which we'll come on to later. But I think that is a foundational sort of indicator, is how comfortable are people with naming how they're feeling and what that might be trying to tell them about what's important to them, or their context.
Absolutely. I'm so with you. And leaders obviously then actually have an influence on the psychological safety that their team is going to experience through that change, by being open about the emotions they're experiencing, because the communication, as we know, through change, when leading through change, is so critical to create the environment where people can go, I'm not very happy about this. It's going to change everything I'm doing, and I'm really worried, because they might be able to identify some risks that no one else in the team has recognized. And if we're moving through at such pace and not noticing some of the major risks, these could be risks that actually expose the organization on a massive scale. So they're super important to listen to what are the emotions telling us. If we've worked in an organization for some time, we know how it works, the fabric, the operating model, and we're supporting changes going on all the time. How can we ensure that we don't miss key information that perhaps our intuition and our emotions are telling us? And we know that those leaders who storm ahead without engaging with the emotions that either they experience or allowing others to share those, actually it can be that we're looking at a bit of an assumption scenario that everyone's going to go through change in the same way. And obviously we know everyone's so very uniquely different. We need to be able to surface that. And in doing so, many people actually share positive and negative emotions when they're asked to talk about change. That's one of the things that stood out for me in the evaluation reports we've done, is that lots of people talk about positive impacts of change when they're reflecting, rather than just the negative side of things. And I think that's also really supportive for organizations to know, how might my people be experiencing and seeing and feeling about upcoming changes? Because it's easy to make an assumption that people are resistant if there's one big barrier that's getting in the way. And actually people aren't. Maybe there's more people that are excited about change, particularly new tech this year. So I think, yeah, that gives a good understanding of that acceptance of emotions, that first part of the PsychFlex model we use to measure change readiness. So let's move on then to the next part, which is distancing, isn't it, Ariel? So distancing ourselves in terms of our thoughts and feelings from a change, and recognizing the difference between thoughts and feelings and facts and evidence, is absolutely critical. I've got a number one impact definitely for leaders that I know about, but Ariel, I'll let you go first. So what do you see as the main kind of impact? What is the result of people being able to, or not being able to, distance themselves with a big change or transformation on the cards?
I think that sort of assumptions testing is something that comes up quite a lot in kind of people being able to understand the value of distancing kind of beyond mindfulness practice, which is important. But I think from a leadership perspective, it's kind of, how do we take a kind of representative understanding and perception of what is happening, what needs to happen, and kind of what are the key experiences that people are having on multiple levels. So I think it kind of links nicely on from the kind of acceptance pillars of naming emotions, but distancing is the kind of active challenge and testing what our perception is, seeking other information, and being able to do that would be really key in terms of having an accurate picture of what is going on, what is needed from kind of different perspectives.
Yeah, for me, it's all about that decision making. So how can we possibly make decisions if we're not basing them on facts and evidence? And just because we've been through a similar change or transformation in the past doesn't mean that this scenario is the same, even if it's the same organization. So what we see is almost some people tripping themselves up by ploughing ahead at pace without thinking about the real impact of the evidence that's in front of them. And we have so much more data now than we've ever had, and the opportunity, particularly with the more connected populations we have in organizations, with dispersed and remote ways of working, or actually using tech already in a completely different way than we used to. And that gives us the opportunity to really use that data differently. And we hear in organizations, loads of our clients talk about building this data-driven mindset. And that's what we're talking about here, is really thinking about what does the data and the evidence show. And we love working in this space, obviously, as psychologists and scientists. We like to work with the facts. So what does the evidence that's right in front of us, the science, show us about what makes the biggest difference? And for me, this part around distancing is critical for decision making for leaders, but not just leaders. I would say, teams as well. Problem solving, working in the moment when challenges come up. Pretty much, every day in large organizations, there are problems that we have to solve in order to find a route through. And if we're able to work with facts and evidence and just remind ourselves that our thoughts and feelings perhaps are giving us an indication of what's going on, but we need to check in with the facts and distance ourselves, that's really, really critical to make sure that we are making the quickest route forward. It's all about pace in that scenario, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think one thing that's kind of come to mind is about how distancing allows us to test assumptions that leaders make specifically about their teams, often kind of linking back to what you mentioned before about sometimes we hear in conversations leaders kind of saying, well, my team isn't ready for this transformation, they're change averse, they're change fatigued. But those are all often assumptions that we're making about our teams because we're not maybe we haven't created the space to test that assumption with the people that we're working with. I think that's also a very important point, that, on that distancing.
Yeah, you're right, and we can reach more people, can't we, to find out the real facts and that data that can inform how we're making those decisions and how we're working together. So so there are lots more opportunities than there ever has been to take that moment to do that distancing in order to increase the pace, actually, in how we're ready for change. So so that's the second part. So the first part we talked about was acceptance of emotions. The second part of the model we just talked about was the distancing, and the third part is about staying present. So staying present in the moment, particularly when something big is happening, a challenge, or something is impacting us, either on our own in a team or as a leader. It's really important not to kind of just get hung up on past experience and thinking, oh gosh, here we go again. This happened to me last year. I can't believe we're going through it all over again. It's going to be the same, and I need to do something, or equally, some people, they don't always have the ability to stay present, and they focus much more on the future, and they can focus a bit on that kind of worrying and that nervousness about, well, I've got to get it right now because the future will be impacted by the decisions and the actions that we take right here, right now. So that being present is a really important part of being in an organization that's facing a big transformation program, and really impactful for our agility in the moment, isn't it? So I guess if we think about agility and change readiness, what would we see if people were really able to stay present?
I think one of the key things would be around prioritization, especially on a kind of leadership level, because that's a real manifestation of whether or not you're able to kind of stay in the present, because lots of times priorities shift, what's the needs shift, the environment shifts. So being able to kind of be comfortable to adapt and shift the kind of the goalposts, the priorities, and being able to react to what's in front of you rather than kind of being too conservative because you're thinking about the future, or letting other past experiences come into play. I guess it's the fruition of it would be in the fast-moving environment. How adaptive are your goals? How adaptive are your priorities? And is that reflective of what is in the now or what you've experienced in the past?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the goal piece as well, because goal setting and objective setting traditionally has happened on a kind of performance management cycle over a year, hasn't it? Where you start goal setting at the beginning of the year in line with the strategy, and then you have objectives for each of your quarters. But actually, with the pace of change that's going on at the moment, those goals had to be so flexible. So being able to constantly tap in rather than having kind of a big goal session at the beginning of the year, and being able to stay present all the time. Absolutely, prioritization. It's so hard. We have to reprioritize all the time. I mean, you and I have had conversations about prioritizing today. It's always the way that we have to be able to juggle all those last minute demands and changes where timelines, are adaptive, new information comes to us. And being able to say, yes, that this might incur a different future, but actually right here, right now, I need to solve this problem, make a decision about which route we go, which piece of tech are we going to use first, which team are we going to start with, where are we going to engage in the organization, and thinking about that kind of that tech transformation, staying present as things evolve, because exactly that, we don't really know. We work with more uncertainty than we realize. I think oftentimes we think we control and influence more than we do. And when we look back and we reflect is always when we recognize how much was really out of our control and happened in the moment. So staying present and being able to make decisions that have an impact on right here, right now is fundamental for change readiness. And thank you, Rachel, for sharing some of your points. Please do send your comments and thoughts in. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing that. But yes, those generative spaces for people to really check out feelings. It's not always that easy, is it, to find somewhere, because our days are often driven by back-to-back Teams meetings, and there's not that kind of lovely time in between to kind of really connect and find out where people are at on this. Am I experiencing this the same way? Is this what everyone else is seeing around me? Because we don't always have that opportunity. So it's super important. We talk about collaboration. More this year, I've seen it come through in strategies and plans than ever before. And I think that's real. I think there's a real need to enhance that collaboration and to do it in the present moment, to make sure that we are really connecting in and checking in. If we're sensing something, say it, rather than just think, oh, I wonder what that was about. Actually bringing it to the forefront and checking in with people differently is definitely a key part of being ready for that change. So moving on then, the next part of the model, Ariel, values. Anchoring ourselves in our values. This is such a hot topic in the PsychFlex model. All the clients we've talked to about this have got very different experiences of how people anchor in their values in the organization, haven't they? But we have got some common themes. What would you say we see as a common theme in organizations around values?
I think this might have been something that we spoke about briefly last time, but firstly, just acknowledging and being comfortable moving away from this sort of blanket organisation level values, because we know that people are coming from so many more diverse perspectives, and you don't tend to have kind of similar one type of person in an organisation. So we need to create space for people to integrate their own values, their personal kind of almost their personal fingerprint into the way that they do their work and the way that they make decisions. But that also then needs to be in collaboration with what the organization needs. And sometimes that's where the conflict is, because people, you might have leaders that are struggling to communicate the why behind a change that they're leading. And the reason behind that is because there's perhaps this disconnect between their own personal values and what they would do versus what the organization needs them to do. But there is a way of connecting that, and it just requires a bit of that active kind of reflective piece of, where do I see myself in this change?
Yeah, and when we sit in our own private bubbles, quite isolated, it can feel quite uncomfortable, can't it, if we look at an organizational need and it really jars with our personal values. But as you said, there's a whole chasm of space in between those things that we need to kind of engage with and really think about what can I do? What's really important to me? And actually, if the organizational need requires me to be more flexible and adaptable in how I apply myself to this organization, it's a choice of me to be here. I've chosen to be part of this organization with the strategy and vision and values that it has. So am I happy to kind of work with the organizational needs, even if they stretch me out of my comfort zone and what I would prefer to do, as long as it's not kind of completely, shunning all of my personal values. There is a space in between. And I think we often assume that everyone should be able to operate exactly according to all their own personal values, and that's just not realistic anymore, is it? Because the diversity we have in organizations and everyone's unique experience of values means that actually people think about the world in very, very different ways than ever before, and more so with a multi-generational workforce. So I talk about this an awful lot because it's so important. It really is a huge part of diversity in organizations, where we get that richness of thinking and ideas and innovation and energy and that human connection by having so many different types of people in the organization. And values are very different across generations, and they tend to kind of clump sometimes, but we need to be able to recognize and develop our own self and other awareness. So this is something that comes back to, Ariel, we talk all the time about emotional intelligence, and we monitor it in all of our programs and our events and workshops, because emotional intelligence increases throughout our lives as human beings. The research shows that it's one of the most stable models that actually we experience as human beings. So being able to really help understand what our values are, that was another thing that comes up for our clients in these change scenarios, is we're talking about the difference between personal values and organizational needs, but a lot of our people don't know what their personal values are. And so we're starting from, core self-awareness conversations and actually trying to move very quickly into change and transformation and collaboration at a pace, when some of that core stuff needs to be attended to. We need to give people a platform, don't we, to talk about what their values are and how they can still align with their values, but also take into consideration the organizational needs and operate in a way that's supportive. And the results obviously show for us that it does have increased collaboration across functions, if people have the chance to be able to share their values and be able to talk about how they contribute to the organizational needs. What we often find is people are far more flexible when they've had a chance to talk about what's important to them and what matters most, than if they're kind of sitting rigid in their own kind of bubble and not had the chance to really share or be recognized. And I guess that comes back to, you know, people love to be seen and heard, don't they, and valued and respected, and people need attention, positive attention. So giving people a chance to talk about what's important to them and opening that conversation could actually enhance our change readiness, because it gives people a chance to talk about and make sense of, how do my values fit into the organizational needs? Because we know we use a different part of our brain when we're talking than when we're kind of writing or thinking. And we need to be able to debate and challenge and listen to other people's ideas. You know, just because I have a personal value, there might be different views on how that could be used for the organization that I don't know about. And that's so valuable for change readiness, for people thinking, actually, this motivates me more than I realized, because I've had a great conversation with other people who've shown me that my values are actually really applicable and transferable in this scenario. So yeah, that's my values is such a wonderful conversation as part of this change and transformation. Is, you know, how much does using AI challenge people's personal values? There are some people out there that are really scared about it, and they're a bit nervous about what AI is going to impact in the world and in economies and in society, and perhaps don't want to experiment with it in the same pace or in the same way that the organizational needs might require us to. But there might be a real risk in not stepping into that space and being kind of rigid about what you will do and what you won't do, and actually giving people the chance to explore that together and find something that they're comfortable with, that feels safe, that feels anchored in something meaningful, is a real opportunity, particularly for those people facing transformation around that AI and tech area. So I'll move us on then to the last one. The last part and the last pillar of our model is, Ariel, tell us all about action.
So action is all about taking that small step. So it's kind of encompassing all the things that we've talked about and being able to integrate the different parts of kind of our emotional systems and be able to see in action, first of all, see a path forward and take it. Yeah, that's probably the essence of that actions piece.
Yeah, and those small steps, it's amazing how many people we ask if they do this, and they say they do, but then when you test their results and you ask them, can you give me some examples of when you've done this? Their reality is quite different. And I think there's a bit of a halo effect there in terms of people thinking that they're more change ready perhaps than they are. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts and comments on this, because we're asking people all around these topics at the moment about their level of self-awareness. And actually what we're noticing is some of that self-awareness is quite low around what's really going on. And obviously using feedback processes and data and evidence to show us what's the real experience is. So, you know, in terms of stalled initiatives, in terms of pilot programs that need to scale but are just going really slowly, you know, what's getting in the way? What is the friction? What is the thing that's stopping people from moving ahead? And being much more change ready and more agile is the ability to take a step, even though tomorrow it might all change. And we know it might change, you know, we might be restructuring tomorrow. There might be, you know, a major problem with the tech adoption that occurs in a day, but we haven't missed out on the learning. And I think that's one of the key things that I notice in taking small steps, is that we still have the opportunity to learn through the steps that we take, even if the outcome of all of those steps isn't as fruitful as we thought it might be when we did them. And I think it's that ability to help people recognize this is where we can grow as humans, as individuals, as leaders in teams. We can grow by taking those chances and taking those steps where we feel comfortable and safe, but also moving on the edges of that and stretching ourselves out of our comfort zone and being able to take those actions, and testing kind of with other people as well, the feedback on, well, how do you think I did in terms of taking actions in those moments, And I just remind everyone, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So do you notice people take actions in difficult times and in uncertainty, or do you notice people kind of freeze and paralyze into kind of not knowing what to do next because it might not have the impact they wanted to? We'd love to hear more about your change and transformation programs and how that ability for people to act through uncertainty occurs, because we see that obviously it can lead to quite significant impacts in transformation programs. So the ability for people to adopt new ways of working, for example, if people are more change ready, they're going to be quicker in their role adjustments. If they're more agile to flexing to organizational needs around their values, if they're more able to take small steps in uncertainty, they're going to cope better. And that impact on well-being and resilience is huge, isn't it, Ariel? So everything we're talking about here has a natural impact on personal and team and organizational resilience. Any areas that you would highlight specifically that support in such times?
I think a couple of things kind of came to my mind. First of which is kind of around the differences that we see when we look at the data, because if you're going based off of people's self-rated kind of pulse check scores of, yes, I think I'm great at taking action in uncertainty, but then the discussion starts, and as soon as that starts, you start to hear people immediately talking about blockers, immediately talking about kind of what's in the way, talking about this kind of fear of failure. So sometimes I think there's that linking back to that emotional intelligence. Some people just aren't aware that their mindset is currently focusing on the things that hold them back from taking action, even though they would like to. So it's kind of the difference in nuances there, and that has its own kind of well-being implications, because then people have certain expectations that are evolving kind of organizationally, especially at a leadership level. And some people feel like they're trying and they want to take that action, but they don't know how, because there's certain things in mental kind of blockers in the way. So being able to kind of get to that action phase is really important.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. I'm just thinking through all those different pieces. You're right. And it's we've talked for so many years about building resilience, but it does feel very I guess just a bit more traditional than the approach we're talking about with human agility, where we're saying, it's not just about being stronger to cope with the big change, but it's about how do all these different approaches really impact our ability to create our own boundaries, to recognize when maybe emotions are riding way too high and we need to take the step back, to really look at where our thoughts are taking over the facts and we're not really giving a full spectrum. And sometimes I feel like what I notice is that it's not any real one of those pillars that's affected. It's kind of all of them in terms of well-being and resilience. It's almost like when people say, oh, I'm not feeling okay, actually, there's an impact on all those different areas. And that the impact in terms of the results for an organization where people are experiencing large change and transformation programs, with some of maybe the psych safety issues that might exist with different populations. Some teams might not feel they have the safety or the encouragement to be innovative and to think differently. That might make them a little bit more cautious. That impacts their well-being and resilience. It might be that maybe the relationships aren't strong if we've got lots of new people onboarding at once, if maybe there's lack of clarity around roles changing in restructures. How do people feel when they're trying really hard to perform and they don't really know what they're trying to create, because they haven't seen good examples of praise or recognition, and they want to continually try, but they're not kind of hitting the mark? It's those kind of those impacts through a change and transformation program that have a big impact on people's well-being and resilience, and discretionary effort, performance, engagement, all so closely linked. If you're constantly trying and then you're not really getting any praise or recognition, and actually maybe feel hidden and not got a pathway forwards that's very easy to notice, that's a real challenge for individuals. And that's where we see performance and engagement drop off, isn't it? Where you look at pockets of an organization and you go, well, we started this change, we had loads of energy, everyone was excited here, but then when it hit this program or it hit this part of the organization and this function, everything slowed down. We saw sickness and turnover kind of rising up a bit more. We saw projects stalling. We saw things not really scaling into the larger rollouts. And we're seeing leaders who perhaps aren't stepping up. So we often get execs who say to me, I really need my senior leaders to step up and take more accountability. And traditionally that is a problem when people don't have the clarity of what's expected of them. So really kind of feeding through that constant communication so that people feel like this isn't just launching a change and transformation into the organization for people to kind of work out for themselves, but how can we keep the pace with good change readiness where each person is able to monitor themselves, how they're experiencing emotions around this change and transformation, how quickly they're able to really look at what they are, what evidence they have, what data they have for making those decisions, whether they're able to be present and stay in those decision-making and problem-solving issues when they're there. And then how much they're able to really take action and in a way that matters to them. So, you know, this model is fundamental to support the people through those transformation programs. And we'd love to hear what you're experiencing, either for yourself or your organization or people that you're working with. And we've had some people come through. I think there's a limit to how much frequent change we can take without it having a big impact on us. If it's managed in a safe and collaborative supportive environment, makes all the difference. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that comment. I think, you know, this is, unfortunately, it's not going away, is it? We know that change is going to be this pace and this volume, if not more, into the future. So our ability to actually learn these new skills around being more flexible and adaptable in our mindset is the opportunity that we have for us now. And we will be sharing in a minute the QR code for our Human Agility Snapshot. So if you're interested in seeing how your organisation might stack up against our global data set and what those results might show and measure in terms of the change readiness of your organisation, we'd love to talk to you about running a snapshot for you. And I think this link just literally gives you the email that comes straight through and we can get in touch with more information. So we've got plenty of case studies an evaluation of lead indicators we can share with you. So please do have a look at that QR code. Let us know if you're interested in finding out about the change readiness and the human agility of your organisation. We can tie it into a change programme. We can look at wellbeing and resilience or performance and engagement and give you some real indicators that actually have a bottom line difference in terms of commercial and financial impact on the organisation, in terms of speed and pace of change and transformation, and how to best support people across the organisation to develop that sustainable approach without it impacting them too much. So how can they build those boundaries and ways of working that really help? And Ariel, I'd love to hear, was there anything else that you wanted to add? Because we're going to be closing off fairly shortly. And I've been talking quite a lot about all the different impacts and lead indicators.
All to say really is that if that's something that would, you know, as an organisation you'd be interested in exploring, this is kind of where we can really kind of go in small or big, or essentially we just need the data and we love to kind of analyse, and the more we can understand about an organisation, the more we can help in terms of developing that change readiness. So I think it's something that I think we're really championing at the moment.
Absolutely. And people love to see some case studies. So let us share those with you too. So if anyone would like to get in touch, please feel free to direct message us here or to get in touch through the link. We've really loved having this conversation. And I actually can't believe how quickly the time's gone, Ariel. Thank you so much for chatting through it with me, talking all about change readiness and the results. What we're measuring and how that has an impact. We've gone through our Site Flex model. We've talked about change readiness and human agility as a concept and how that might be experienced in a change and transformation program. And we've got lots more that we can share with you that could be more specific to your organisation in that snapshot opportunity. So please do get in touch. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's commented and shared their thoughts and ideas. Very happy to answer some of those afterwards as well in case we've missed any. Thank you so much, Ariel. Thanks, Mike, in the background, who's supporting us on these streamings. And the third in our series is going to be next month. So we'll be shortly releasing the date and the invitations to the next LinkedIn Live. Also setting up a roundtable for some strategic HR leaders, a smaller, much smaller group. If anyone is interested in that, please get in touch with me directly. That's for senior leaders and executive level people who are leading transformation programs. So please do get in touch. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Ariel, again. It's been wonderful talking to you, and look forward to hearing what's next. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Pleasure as always.